GlitchTrap? Is that you? Oh, no, wait, it's just M2 in the shape of GlitchTrap. And even though it acts extremely similar to the anomaly, they totally aren't the same, right guys? Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat my opinion on the nature of GlitchTrap's identity. I believe now more than ever that M2 is within GlitchTrap, in one form or another. No more shall this F10N4 M1 propaganda fill your recommendations. It's time to uncover the truth once and for all. I've been on Twitter more recently, I know, big mistake, and as a result seen many differing opinions on this one little bunny man thing. It's a hot topic issue coming off of FNAF's newest release, and rightfully so, as Secret of the Mimic gave us a lot of context regarding the Mimic. In the last video from this series, I went over why I believe M1 is not a part of GlitchTrap, and I recommend watching that section for more context regarding today's video. If not, don't worry, I'll reiterate the main points when relevant to the overall GlitchTrap debate. Today, we're going down the rabbit hole and answering the infamous question mark of a character known as GlitchTrap. My name is Minibyte Games, and I'll be your guide through the Fazbear virtual experience. But first, I want to thank all of you guys for the insane amount of support on my F10N4 video. I honestly never thought the channel would make it this far, and it's only possible due to all of you guys watching now. I will continue to strive to make better theories and content for you to enjoy. Alright, back to the main video now. To start, let's take a trip down memory lane and reminisce on the good old days of summer 2019. Five Nights at Freddy's VR Help Wanted released on May 28th, 2019, and was the start of a new era for FNAF with Steel Wool leading the mainline games. Help Wanted was where, of course, GlitchTrap was first introduced as a character, and we also learn the most about him from his debut appearance. He acts and looks a lot like William Afton. I mean, who else lures kids to the back room and dresses up in a Spring Bonnie costume? Sure, the design may be a bit different from what we've seen before, but it's gotta be Afton, right? Well, looking further into the game, we learn that GlitchTrap has been mimicking Tape Girl's voice to trick our player into letting him enter our mind. Does that sound like Afton? Even more suspicious is this image titled ORGN from within the files. Using the context of the game and its focus, I think the safest conclusion is that this endo in the image is somehow tied to the origin of GlitchTrap, hence the abbreviation ORGN. After all, Tape Girl says they scanned in some random circuit boards from Fazbear to expedite the process, almost as if Fazbear sent something containing a mimic program from an endoskeleton to automate much of the coding. And, as mentioned before, GlitchTrap takes over the mind of our player, someone who seems to be testing the game in-universe. The Curse of Dreadbear DLC expanded on this understanding, giving us the return of GlitchTrap, hints of some Fall Fest origin, and the introduction of a new character, Vanny. Based on a hidden audio clip when wearing the Vanny mask and holding the GlitchTrap plush, we can conclude that the player of Help Wanted 1 likely became this Vanny character. After FNAF AR and its questionable emails, this narrative seems to be expanded upon with the introduction of a character named Vanessa.
Vanny?
Vanny. It is very similar to Vanessa, and also Bunny.
Thanks, Freddy, I think we get it. It is heavily insinuated through these emails that Vanessa is Vanny. Shocker, I know. Connecting this back to Help Wanted, that means our player must be Vanessa, given the Vanny mask and the secret audio from Curse of Dreadbear. FNAF AR also included several hints that GlitchTrap was somehow in control of the AR animatronics. The flash of a glitchy Bonnie sprite in the trailer, the strange circumstances of why the service was creating animatronics mimicking Springtrap, the email chain regarding a glitch in the systems. It all hints to GlitchTrap's continued involvement in the games. And then, Security Breach released. Yeah, this is where our little journey through time ends. Security Breach totally fucked up everyone's understanding of the story for a pretty long time, and we still see some of those effects to this very day. Luckily, we've had 3 games since then to course correct us in the right direction, so let's see what those games tell us about GlitchTrap. It is up for debate whether GlitchTrap actually appears in Ruin, but we are introduced to two seemingly new antagonists. The Mimic endoskeleton located in the basement of the Pizzaplex is something we'll touch on later, but Helpy might just be more important to the rabbit virus that we've been discussing. He acts pretty similar in terms of manipulation and for how they're both digital avatars that mimic voices. This is further insinuated by Help Wanted 2, where Helpy directly helps GlitchTrap by telling you to collect the Phasforce figures. Doing so allows GlitchTrap to give the Vanny mask to Cassie through MaskBot, a win for Helpy/GlitchTrap. Oh, and don't forget that ending's internal name in the files, HelpTrap. Moving on from the tiny bear, GlitchTrap is also responsible for interfering with some minigames and blocking locked minigames, hinting at some sort of connection between GlitchTrap and the mask. When completing specific tasks spray painted on the hub walls, GlitchTrap hands you dolls wearing the original 6 animatronics masks. As I have mentioned several times on the channel, these dolls are called memories, and are tied to the destruction of GlitchTrap in the Princess Quest 4 ending. Expanding on this, we also receive the white tiger plush in the same manner as these dolls. It seems fairly simple to conclude then that it is also a memory tied to GlitchTrap. But there does seem to be some layer of separation given the stark difference in physical appearance and style. Returning to Ruin, we also get a look at Vanny's Phaser Blast room, where it seems that GlitchTrap's silhouette and his Princess Quest minions are on the walls. Oh, and there's a vibrant pixel sword stabbing the Princess Quest 3 machine, indicating to me that Princess Quest 3 was conquered. And finally, we get to Secret of the Mimic, the game this whole series is supposed to be dedicated to solving. Considering Secret of the Mimic takes place in 1979, likely way before GlitchTrap was created, the most this game gives us for information on the character is an insight into how he could have originated, specifically with the introduction of 2 programs with the sole purpose of mimicking, notably M1 and M2. But before we get into that, let's run through all the current theories regarding GlitchTrap's identity. Please welcome to the stage, GlitchAfton. The theory that GlitchTrap only consists of William Afton, aka the purple guy, aka the yellow rabbit. GlitchMimic, the idea that either M1 or M2 is solely GlitchTrap, with the given subcategories Glitch M1 and Glitch M2. GlitchBoth, the concept that both Afton and one of the mimics form GlitchTrap. And finally, GlitchAgony, the theory that Agony created the avatar of GlitchTrap. Who will win? Who will prove themselves to be absolutely based? Find out right now. Starting with GlitchAfton, this theory does hold a lot of merit, given the amount of details connecting GlitchTrap to Afton. Recreating the MCI in Pizza Party, dressing up as Spring Bonnie, and giving the player memories related to seemingly the main 6 victims of Afton. It all makes sense. And going back to that last part, if GlitchTrap really was a mimic instead, wouldn't it make more sense, given Secret of the Mimic, to see this group of 6 animatronics instead? Just something to think about. On top of this, the blob-like figure reminiscent of GlitchTrap in Princess Quest 1 literally repeats Afton's iconic phrase. Afton's 8-bit sprite can also be seen in AR's launch trailer, and it is insinuated that the virus in their systems caused the production of Springtrap animatronics. It's really quite simple then. Burntrap's corpse is obviously Afton's body and suit, even more degraded from FFPS. This would mean it was likely fixed up by Vanny, Afton's new puppet. Case closed then. It all makes sense, right? Well, there's one thing you forgot to consider. I have a question for anyone who doesn't think the Mimic is involved. Why would Scott have GlitchTrap mimic voices, and help the Mimic Endo through Helpy, and introduce the Mimic as a concept at the same time if GlitchTrap didn't have any Mimic influence at all? Now I get that isn't contradicting evidence to GlitchAfton, don't worry, we'll get there, but at this point it feels like Scott is really trying to connect these 2 characters. Let's delve into what seems to be FNAF Twitter's favorite interpretation, GlitchMimic. In the Help Wanted 2 update, you can enter the code 1979 to get the white tiger plush from GlitchTrap in the same manner as the main 6 memories. This tiger plush was, of course, one of David's favorite toys that he got for his first birthday. David's spirit also seems to take the form of this plush post-death, in the basement during the events of Secret of the Mimic. With this in mind, plus the fact that collecting this plush unlocks the Mimic statue in Help Wanted 2, it seems that GlitchTrap must have some sort of connection to David and or the Mimic. From what we've seen thus far, Afton doesn't have any connection or memory with this tiger, so GlitchAfton doesn't seem to have a way to explain this plush. Going all the way back to Help Wanted 1, GlitchTrap has been shown to mimic voices, namely tape girls. This was concluded based on GlitchTrap's voice lines in-game.
Hello? Can you hear me?
And the fact that there are 2 introductory tapes from Tape Girl that literally contradict each other. You could argue that Afton picked up this particular skill in the digital world, but when the Mimic has been associated with this ability many.
You have made your choice. You are not going to make it out of here alive.
Many times.
Oh, can't right now, buddy. We can do something fun tomorrow. I promise.
It seems like a lost cause. Help Wanted also states that circuit boards were used to make the experience. And don't forget the image labeled ORGN showing off an old endo. If this is supposed to connect to the origin of GlitchTrap, which seems like the most likely interpretation, then GlitchTrap's code seems to have originated from an endoskeleton circuit boards. I wonder if we've been introduced to an endoskeleton with similar attributes to GlitchTrap. Secret of the Mimic further strengthens the GlitchMimic argument through 3 new details. Firstly, the Mimic endoskeleton shown throughout the game has a habit of wearing mascot suits similar to the GlitchTrap suit, which isn't a style we've ever seen Afton wear in the games. The Mimic and Murray's are also heavily tied to Helpy, and with Rue and Helpy's connections to GlitchTrap, the Mimic theory gets even more appealing. Finally, and most importantly in my opinion, the Bad Van ending literally shows the Mimic stuffing us into a suit on stage. This perfectly parallels the pizza party ending with GlitchTrap from Help Wanted. And you cannot convince me that this is just a coincidence. Oh, and a last little nail in the coffin comes from the storyteller, where a storytelling AI works very similarly in some ways to GlitchTrap and is running the program Mimic 1. Okay, so if GlitchAfton is looking pretty grim, then I think it's about time that we introduce our third candidate. Some people may say it's redundant and useless, others praise it as a peak theory. Allow me to introduce GlitchBoth, cause why have 1 when 2 is twice the fun? You see, this theory combines the strengths of the previous 2 theories, and in the process explains some other mysteries. Under GlitchBoth, one of the Mimic programs and Afton at some point fused to create the entity known as GlitchTrap. All of the memories from Help Wanted 2 are accounted for, the 6 with Afton, and the tiger plush with the Mimic. And it also explains why there's a stylistic difference in how the memories are presented. This theory also allows for both Help Wanted 2 endings to work in conjunction. In exchange for the Mimic Helpy half of GlitchTrap escaping through the mask, the player gets access to the Afton half, so it can be destroyed by Vanny. It also explains more clearly why the Mimic would be locked into an Afton personality, because frankly, the current explanations excluding literal Afton influence are a little shaky to say the least. The way GlitchMimic believers get around this most often is using the reasoning that when the Mimic code was scanned into the Fazbear virtual experience, it got an extensive lesson into the history of Afton. A lot of Fazbear Entertainment's history surrounds him, so that fact, plus their shared homicidal tendencies, would lead the Mimic to take on an Afton personality. As much as I like this answer, I cannot ignore the evident flaws that arise from this explanation. It is heavily insinuated that the Help Wanted game we play in the real world is the same one Fazbear is making in the FNAF universe. Given this fact, I cannot reasonably believe that anyone, especially a mimicking program, would learn a lot about Afton from looking at all the material in-game. There is almost no information on Afton within the actual virtual experience, given they cut all the lore-heavy Easter eggs and minigames from the original entries. And on top of all of this, why would the Mimic program choose to mimic Afton out of every other animatronic and character connected to these minigames? While this major issue could be cleared up in a future game, possibly by showing this process or explaining that Fazbear scanned in Afton files with the VR material, it's too much of an issue personally for now. Back to the main topic, GlitchBoth can also explain GlitchTrap's seemingly random avatar change from the Yellow Rabbit mascot to Technician Helpy. If all Afton influence was removed before Ruin in Help 1 and 2, then only the Mimic part would remain, resorting to a mascot that is much more familiar to this half of the anomaly. Without GlitchBoth, it's also tough to find another solution for why Afton specifically appears in the AR trailer, while still keeping the Mimic program relevant. And as a little cherry on top, this theory has given me the best and most satisfying answer for Burntrap. But I'm getting ahead of myself, that's for later in the video. For now, it's time to move on to the final main GlitchTrap identity solution, GlitchAgony. As much as I was kinda glazing GlitchBoth a second ago, I must also concede that the Agony explanation offers some very attractive conclusions. Before we can get to those, however, I have to do a better job at explaining FNAF AR Special Delivery. Special Delivery was released in the long wait between Curse of Dreadbear and Security Breach. And oh boy did it give us a lot of content to go over. You see, the actual premise for the game is basically an upscaled version of Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, now called the Fazbear Funtime Service. Fazbear Entertainment decided it was a good idea to send countless animatronics across the world to be rented out for birthdays, graduations, and other celebrations. Unfortunately, as per usual, things aren't as safe as they seem. The team running the service notices a virus in the system, causing for animatronics to go haywire, and production to follow strange orders. You see, a key component of the game is Remnant, and Dark Remnant, a pretty clear-cut representation of Agony. It seems as though the service wants you to collect as much of this Remnant as possible, and avoid the Dark Remnant. You can even send the animatronics out to collect Remnant for you. Based on this information about the virus interfering with the Funtime service, and the animatronics being tampered with, it's a small leap in logic to assume that this virus is using the animatronics, and possibly users, to collect Remnant from other locations. Given what we learn about the virus, notably its connection to Vanessa and to creating AR Springtrap, it seems like an even smaller leap to say that this virus is GlitchTrap. I mean, what other virus appears in recent FNAF games that interferes with animatronics and has a particular interest in Afton? That's a trick question, by the way, there is none. But if all that's true, why the heck is GlitchTrap collecting mass amounts of Remnant? Well, here's where GlitchAgony comes along to answer this tough question. The specifics of Agony won't really matter too much for this video, but its basic description is strong negative emotions that tether to objects or places, causing them to act haunted. One of the main characters associated with Agony is our second favorite pigtailed humanoid animatronic, Eleanor. So what can we take from Eleanor's story to explain GlitchTrap's weird interest in collecting Remnant? Well, in the Fazbear Frights epilogue number 10, Eleanor tricks the Stitch Wraith into bringing her to Dr. Talbert's house, where she then proceeds to trick Talbert into giving her Remnant. After receiving a dose of the Remnant, Eleanor appears to be stronger, which makes sense given she just received literal soul energy. This sequence tells us two details that can be applied to GlitchTrap under this theory. Number 1, Agony entities like Eleanor seem to seek out Remnant, and number 2, the more Remnant these Agony entities collect, the stronger they get. So, it seems that if GlitchTrap is created from a source of Agony, then it would attempt to collect as much Remnant as possible, just like we see in FNAF AR. Now, what would it be using this Remnant power for? Perhaps to reanimate a certain dead bunny man. But we're still not there yet. The GlitchAgony explanation even has more backing from Secret of the Mimic, where it seems that at least M2 contains the agony of Edwin. Note the black tear marks of Broken Jackie, very similar to Pip Bonnie's from the game and the description of agony from Fazbear Frights. Oh, and you know who else recently has this same black oily liquid as a part of their design? That's right, the Blob. And this theory can quite easily explain this character as well. You know how the Blob is made up of AR animatronics? Well, as well as the puppet, but Lefty was supposed to be an AR, so he doesn't count. Well, if the AR animatronics remnant was used or taken, what if the dark remnant, or agony, that Glitchtrap doesn't need is left in a pile outside of FFPS? If that pile grew to be big enough, we could end up with a giant blob of AR animatronics and random agony, with different agendas from Glitchtrap. I'm gonna be honest, this is the best explanation I can currently think of for the blob. None of that UCN or Molten Freddy stuff. We don't see any animatronics outside of AR in the blob that would tie it to either one of those conclusions, unless Steel Wool is hiding Molten Freddy in the middle of that giant mess. So, now that we've spent time with all of our candidates, which one will come out on top? GlitchAfton can help explain the appearance, the Burntrap body, and the memory plushes from Help Wanted 2. GlitchMimic solves the voice mimicking, the white tiger plush, and the transition to Helpy. GlitchBoth has the benefits of both, with the cost of questioning when they would have met and being a little redundant. GlitchAgony explains the weirdness of AR and connects to the references of Agony/Nightmarion. And the answer is... none of them. Okay. I know the theorist community loves the wacky theory names, so let's go with GlitchBoth Agony. So what the heck does that even entail? My current belief on the identity of Glitchtrap is that it's the result of the Mimic code and its agony mixed with Afton's agony. Let's break it down. I've already explained how the Mimic likely contains agony due to Edwin beating up the endoskeleton, similar to its origin from the Tales books. This is further shown through Moon.exe, where the player, M2, creates a statue of Edwin's avatar, Moon, showing M2 internalizing the violence and agony it gained from Edwin. While this only applies to M2, you could argue that M1 also got agony from Edwin, or from Fiona's death at Fallfest. But why do I believe that Afton's agony is here rather than literally Afton? Well, firstly, we have no literal way for Afton to haunt the Mimic program. The last we see of him, he's stuck in UCN. It would also further explain the slight differences in Glitchtrap's portrayal that differentiate him from the Yellow Rabbit. However, most importantly, this angle would allow for us to explain the importance of Nightmarion. Alright, speedrun Nightmarion explanation, go! Nightmarion is called Nightmare repeatedly and takes his place in the FNAF 4 Halloween edition. Nightmare's Night in FNAF 4 is called Shadow Freddy, and they're all fairly similar looking, so it makes sense to say that they're different representations of the same entity. Given their dark figures and the black liquidy tentacles of Nightmarion, it seems to be a being of agony. The FNAF 3 Follow Me minigames show Shadow Freddy helping Afton lure the animatronics to the safe room. On top of this, Nightmarion is the poster child of UCN, a game about reflections and Afton. This could be hinting that Nightmarion is the dark reflection of Afton, the agony he created. Based on these connections, I feel it is fair to reason that Nightmarion represents Afton's agony in some way. Now, if that Afton agony creature was within Glitchtrap, then we should expect to see signs of Nightmare, Shadow Freddy, and/or Nightmarion somewhere. Oh, would you look at that? Another funky detail that points to agony shenanigans over literal Afton is how Glitchtrap is seemingly defeated in Help Wanted 2. To unlock Princess Quest 4 and get the chance to end Glitchtrap, you need to collect these 6 memories. Going back to Fazbear Frights, agony entities are pretty heavily tied to memories, such as Eleanor with the ball pit. For a simpler example, take the yellow pit rabbit monster and the MCI memory he seems tied to in Into the Pit. In Return to the Pit, the interactive novel version of Into the Pit, Oswald is able to change the memory of the children through a pixel arcade-style world. Doing so brings Oswald into what seems to be a better version of the future and pizzeria, with Pit Bonnie now gone. This demonstrates that at least some agony entities are tied to and affected by memories, and that principle can be applied to Glitchtrap in Help Wanted 2. Collecting the 6 memory dolls seems to leave Glitchtrap vulnerable, meaning it's tied to the memories in some way, like other agony entities. So there you have it, my Afton agony explanation. While we don't have an event yet for the Mimic and Afton's Agony to mix, we also don't really have one to create Glitchtrap realistically under any other theory yet. However, I will say it does make more sense to me for Afton's Agony to haunt the circuit board than for Afton to be literally scanned onto the circuit board. But now, it is time to move on to the second half of this identity, the Mimic. The main question that people have been debating over since Secret of the Mimic released is which Mimic version becomes Glitchtrap. Now, I'm not gonna re-explain my whole stance on the issue, given I just did that in the F10 and 4 video, but I will be happy to give the cliff notes on why Glitchtrap is obviously M2. If you want a more in-depth look comparing our two candidates, you can check out that M1 video in the description of this one. In the Help Wanted 2 December update, we see Glitchtrap giving our player the White Tiger plush, something vastly more associated with David/M2 than M1. Why would M1 have some significant attachment or memory to the White Tiger plush when Secret of the Mimic clearly connects the plush to David? However, the actual evidence that convinced me of M2 involvement is the bad van ending from Secret of the Mimic, where the Mimic nearly perfectly replicates Pizza Party from Help Wanted 1. And guess who takes the place of Glitchtrap in this new version? That's right, the M2 Endo. Now, I know there are some others that will say this is the M1 Endo, but if that turns out to be the case, I may actually lose hope in Scott's writing abilities. All I'm saying is if it acts violently like M2, and stuffs the player in a suit like M2, and has the same weird leg that only M2 should realistically have to our knowledge, then it should realistically be M2 we're seeing here. If it's not M2, I might just explode. One piece of evidence that was brought to my attention more recently that favors the M1 interpretation is the Witch in the Woods story from Candy Cadet. In Secret of the Mimic, we see a witch in a cabin in the woods during our Moon.exe adventure. This clearly connects to the Help Wanted 2 story, where the witch seems to take on the role of Glitchtrap, and the story is about a victim who escaped but then returned to kill him, only to fail. Given the witch is F10 and 4 in Moon.exe, see my video on that, this means M1 must be Glitchtrap, right? Well, before we go there, is there any other way to interpret the Help Wanted 2 story with this new context? In Moon.exe, the player, aka M2, is the one who visits the cabin in the woods, not a victim of Glitchtrap. And within that cabin, M2 receives the baby owl mask from F10 and 4 to mimic David. So, what if instead, the Help Wanted 2 story is telling us the past and future of the Mimic? M2 was initially lured into the cabin by M1 to mimic David, but received a scar through Edwin's agony and violence as a result of this mimicking. Now this next part is a bit more speculative, but we could see M2 in the future seek out M1, just like in this story. Someone would also have to take the role of the little boy in the story that leads M2 back to the witch. I think Gregory could fairly well fit this role, especially since there are hints in Ruin that Gregory lured the Mimic Endo down into where it's trapped in Ruin. Going back to the story, that means Gregory would lead M2 into the oven, and therefore fix M2 into the form of David, just like we see in the Secret of the Mimic Moon.exe ending. Is this a bit of a stretch and fairly speculative? Yes, but it does allow for the Witch in the Woods to be explained without switching to Glitch M1, as doing that would mean we would have to find some other way to work around the pretty clear Glitch M2 evidence that I've already presented. But hey, if you want to go down that M1 road, I support your journey. I just won't be following that path. So there you have my breakdown of Glitchtrap's true nature. It almost feels poetic how a mixture of the main theories on Glitchtrap is what truly solves his character. As good as this is for understanding FNAF, I have yet to really touch on the motivation of this version of Glitchtrap outside of AR. Figuring out what Glitchtrap is doing is pivotal to connecting these games and answering the big question mark of a game known as Security Breach. I believe that the M2 part likely continues its sole drive to cause violence, as hinted at by many of the tale stories where accidents caused by Pizzaplex attractions kill people. This could even in some way connect to the failed victim of Jeremy in Help Wanted. Maybe M2 took things a bit too far. There is something to be said about GlitchTrap choosing Gregory, but that's going to have to be saved for next time. Instead, it's time to talk about how Burntrap is one of the ultimate goals of GlitchTrap. I'm gonna be brutally honest for a second. I hate Burntrap. Honestly, I do. No matter how cool the design could be, the amount of confusion and divisiveness over this one character has just ruined it for me. It's Scraptrap patched up by Vanny and redesigned by Steel Wolf. It's the Mimic code with a random corpse on top. Or even worse, Kelly corpse. And after all of this time, I'm still shocked at how divided people are over this one character. To be clear though, I'm not blaming the theorists, or the fans of these different interpretations. While I think my conclusion has been hinted at throughout the game's post-SB, I understand why people just don't agree. But you know what would totally help this issue? A new anthology book series answering the mystery of Burntrap over 10 books. You better be taking notes, Scott. This is what the fans really want. Anyway, rant over. What do I think Burntrap actually is? Well, to start, let's take a look at Help Wanted 2, where the Help Trap ending begins by showing us a very familiar charging pod on stage. After a moment, the pod door begins to creep open, and then a very familiar hand moves out. This ending seems like it's trying very hard to relate back to Burntrap's introduction, where his charging door slides open to reveal the old bunny man. So given this pretty fair connection, and the design similarities of both having their origins in Spring Bonnie / Afton, I argue that GlitchTrap and Burntrap are in one way or another the same character. As one moves out of their pod in the Vanny mask system, the other moves out of their charging station. But wait, how am I so confident that Burntrap stepped out of the pod if it's insinuated that the Burntrap ending didn't happen in Security Breach? And this would be a good point if it wasn't for a little detail in Ruin. In the free DLC, there is a well-known claw mark texture found in a couple different places below the Pizzaplex. Underscore, a fellow theorist, found that this scratch mark perfectly aligns with Burntrap's hand and fingers, indicating that at some point between Security Breach and Ruin, Burntrap left his charging pod. Almost like it took place during the events of Help Wanted 2, which slots in right between these entries. And you know what we find mysteriously trapped down there in Ruin? The Mimic endoskeleton. Listen, I get the design doesn't line up very well between the two, but when you're dealing with a literal shape-shifting endoskeleton that appears to change its parts often, I don't think that's a very strong argument against the environmental storytelling of Ruin. So, if Burntrap seems to be GlitchTrap, and is literally made using the Mimic endoskeleton, then some questions begin to pop up. How was Burntrap made? Why was Burntrap made? And whose corpse is that? Starting with the first question, Security Breach tells us that Vanny used Glamrock Freddy to go down to the sinkhole.
She brought me here. I found myself for the first time when I cleared the path. I did not want to, but I had no choice.
And Gregory in Ruin states that the Mimic Endo has been trapped down there for a very long time.
I really don't know what it is, but it's been trapped down here a really long time.
It doesn't seem like a far stretch to say that Vanny went down there to get the Mimic Endo from M2's memories. But you know what would have also been down there? The remains of Afton's corpse from after the FNAF 6 fire. I believe Burntrap is the culmination of the combination of Afton and M2 that originally made GlitchTrap. They started combined in the digital space for a VR game, and it was always the plan to move to the physical world. Finally, after setting up shop at the Pizzaplex, GlitchTrap through Vanny and GGY uses the remnant from the AR animatronics to revive Afton. Afton's agony through GlitchTrap is brought back with its physical host. Burntrap is literally the physical representation of GlitchBoth, the Mimic endoskeleton and program combined with William Afton. However, in Help Wanted 2, the Afton side of GlitchTrap is destroyed by Vanessa, so the M2 Endo has no use for the Burntrap disguise. It changes out some of its parts, possibly from damage. Then, Gregory lures it down to the mascot room using the Freddy walkie-talkie, collapsing the vent behind the Endo. M2 trapped under the sinkhole with the talkie, Gregory's backpack nearby the vent, and the remains of GlitchTrap, now Helpy, ready to manipulate Cassie into letting the Endo free. So there you have it, my current Burntrap explanation all laid out. Before I end the video, there is one last point I want to hit today regarding M2 and GlitchTrap. Does David possess M2 in any way? Clearly David lived on, at least as the White Tiger spirit, but is there some sort of connection to the M2 endo? And if so, how? Well, as others have noted, some of the White Tiger voice lines in Secret of the Mimic are actually shared with M2.
Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play?
Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play?
Indicating some sort of connection. We even have an opportunity for this possession to happen, as M1 was the one to go get David for the party, and therefore would have been one of the first ones near him when he died. Given that M2 is a copy of M1, it is possible that the spirit either stayed with the physical endoskeleton that could then become M2, or it could have just transferred over to the new program. So the question comes down to, is this evidence convincing enough? To me personally, the answer is yes, especially given the White Tiger plush reappearing with GlitchTrap in Help Wanted 2. On top of this, GlitchTrap taking on the form of Helpy, the in-universe implied child of Mr. and Mrs. Helpful, seems to be pushing the story more in that direction. Plus, to be honest, I don't know what else David's spirit could be doing in the Pizzaplex era games, if not hitching a ride on M2. All I know for now is that GlitchTrap is always watching and learning. If you enjoyed this theory, consider hitting that subscribe button and leaving a like. It means a lot to me and helps support this little theory channel. I'm planning to make one more part to this Secret of the Mimic series, wrapping up every little question that I've yet to answer from Secret of the Mimic. If there's any questions that you guys want answered, be sure to comment with any specific questions that you want to make sure I hit in that next part. Due to me trying to condense the rest of the questions into one video, that video may end up being very long, and it could take a while. So no promises on when that's releasing. And with all that said, this is gonna be Mini Byte Games heading out. See you guys next time!